Hey, this is Jack, and this video is called How Important Are Relationship Deal Breakers? This is a reaction video to a short video from Stan Tatkin. For those of you who don't know Stan Tatkin, he has a TEDx talk you can check out. He is an attachment specialist. He actually trains therapists in attachment. And I haven't seen this, so I'm going to go and minimize myself. Let's watch it together and see what he has to say. It's a nice B-roll.
Deal breakers are important to pay attention to because a deal breaker means just that. We have something, you and I, that we disagree about, and it's a deal breaker. We cannot go forward until we either take that off the table or one of us gives up on something that's very important to us. So an example might be, I love doing drugs and alcohol. I don't have a problem with it. I enjoy it. I think we should do it. And you say, no, I don't think that is what I want to do. And I don't want to have a family where there's drugs and alcohol. Fair enough. In fact, both people, you could say, it's fair. You can really ask for, demand, expect the thing that you really want. However, you may not be able to be in a relationship with that person. That's just the way it goes. So a deal breaker is a cold, hard look at reality. Both partners, can we resolve this issue, take it off the table for good, without residue, without it coming back like a bad lunch? That's really important. It has to be taken care of before moving forward. Now, you might say...
So I totally get where he's coming from with this, right? And ideally, these kind of deal breakers would be flushed out in the dating process, or perhaps some of them now are even taken care of up front because of the filters that you put in on a dating app, right? So you're perhaps filtering people out that have certain political preferences, or perhaps you're religious and you want people who are religious, or you're not religious and you want people who aren't religious. But perhaps there are some that are a little bit trickier to get a handle of than something like this. I'm going to imagine would come out in a dating process, probably, because if someone is so into alcohol, for instance, you'd probably know, because it would probably be part of the dates that you're having. I like the standard that he's setting, like, let's take this off, get it kind of resolved once and for all. I'm just curious how likely that is for anything where there is some kind of values mismatch. I'm wondering if a lot of these things are actually going to be navigated and tended to in all sorts of different ways ongoingly. John Gottman, the relationship researcher, actually says something like 69% of all things that couples, disagreements that couples have actually never get resolved. And they're just things that people learn to kind of deal with and exist with. So I guess in Stan Tatkin parlance, they've taken something that could be a deal breaker and they've said, I will coexist with this thing. But let's go on.
Okay, why do I want to do drugs and alcohol? Or why don't you want to do drugs and alcohol?
Okay, so we're cutting deeper.
And here's how it's probably going to come down. And that is, the person who is best able to argue why it's a good idea for me and you to do drugs or not to do drugs is probably going to win this thing. So in a bid for what are we going to do, how are we going to do this, what do we agree on, big ticket items, the secure functioning way to resolve or deal with this is to ask the question, or at least see if you can argue, here's why my idea, what I want, is good for me, but also good for you. And I have to answer that, argue that.
So I think he's taking it from, like, who's the better debater? Because I think that's what he was saying earlier, is who's going to make the best argument in some ways might carry the day, to actually looking into a frame that's more inherently win-win.
For you, it has to be strong. Otherwise, I can't sell you on the idea. Now, even though both of you may be very good at arguing this, you still may not agree, in which case, I'm sorry, you probably can't go forward. Now, here's the other thing. When people are forced to really deal...
I just want to say, in the particular example that he's giving, there is obviously one possibility, which is one person can engage in a set of behaviors, but they're just not doing it as a couple, right? So if someone really wants to be able to do drugs, you might say, okay, they want the right to be able to do that at home, possibly, but I don't know that they're always going to need to be having their partner doing it with them. Obviously, I could see how this could be a cause of conflict, and this is, his kind of fictional example. But I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I think there are going to be some things that lend themselves more easily to a sort of almost like a little bit of out of sight, out of mind, right? Like, yeah, you kind of get to do that when you're, on your own, or I'm away for the weekend, or out with the lads, or whatever. As opposed to something like, maybe the religious frame. So something where we want this to actually be the kind of ongoing sea that we're swimming in. And my sense is, again, a lot of that probably gets handled in dating because people just aren't attracted to people that have a huge values difference. But there could be some kind of intense chemistry that has you overlook values differences. I've definitely had that experience before.
With deal breakers, they often come up with creative solutions because in the end, breaking up is very hard to do. Relationships are very sticky. And one person may decide they'll give up this thing because I'd rather be with you than not be with you. And that would be fine. But again, you would have to make sure, looking down the road, this is not going to come back to haunt either of you. That would be unfair. So deal breaker.
So I'm curious what he means by that, right? I think he's a fear type. So he's afraid that something is going to come up in the future out of the blue, sort of left field. If someone is willing to say, okay, I want to be with you, so I'm willing to kind of be with this thing, right? It could be an aspect of your career. It could be someone in your family I don't get on with. It could be, a predilection for drugs in the instance he's talking about. So if that were to come back to haunt you, I mean, it could be that the drugs end up being, problematic, right? There's like an excessive use of them. I think the other risk here is that actually you're saying yes to something that you're really a no to. And that's a difficult discernment. I'm imagining that's one way that you could end up haunted, is that you sort of said yes to something, right? So sometimes this comes up with couples where it's like, I said yes to long distance, but actually now living it, I'm kind of a no to it, right? Or maybe I said yes to moving halfway across the world to be with you, but actually now we're doing that, I don't like it. So yes, I did say yes to it, but now we've got more data and more lived experience. So I like what he's pointing to. I just imagine that some of these things are a little bit more updatable or reviewable, right? Or because maybe it's, I was willing to do that so long as we had a young family, but now we don't have a young family. So actually the frame has changed, right? Or I was willing to do that because we were broke, but now we're not broke. And so I'm actually not willing to sacrifice doing the work that I love, right? Whereas before, because we couldn't pay the rent, yeah, I was willing to do this job that inherently don't enjoy, but just because, right? So I don't know if these things are quite as static as he's making out.
Look at it. There are big ones, small ones. Really survey the field and make sure you deal with them before you go forward, because you want a future, right?
Yeah. So this is Stan Tatkin's book, Here We Do. There's also Wired for Love, I think is his best-selling book. As I say, check him out on TEDx. He has a specific view. I mean, he has a view that's very, focused on safety and attachment. And I get why he's focusing on that. He may be a little less appealing. Like, let's say someone like Esther Perel, I think carries a lot more of the kind of the desire, the passion, the eroticism of relationship. I think Stan Tatkin is much more about safety and creating ground. Yeah, I mean, I like what he's pointing to. If you can deal with something, deal with it. And I'm imagining that sometimes difficulties come up more because things change. People's desires change. Maybe I wanted to do that business 5 years ago, but now I don't. Or maybe I was willing to sacrifice this thing, but now I'm not. And so I guess I'm maybe just also advocating for the ability to try and relate through these things. In a sense, it's almost like a spiritual practice, right? To the extent that we are becoming, to the extent that we are open-ended systems, to the extent that we are unfolding in front of our own eyes, to that extent, things aren't static, and to that extent, we may not have the same exact matrix of desire or want to hold down the same commitment to things that were true for us. Right? Even remember Gandhi said this, that, you know, something I said a year ago, that's maybe not what I think now. Right? So truth, in some ways, at least personal truth, updates through the stream of our own lives and authenticity. That's what I've got. What do you think? Do you like this approach? Is it making sense to you? Are there things that you're contemplating right now that are deal breakers? Are there deal breakers that you experienced in the past? Hit us up in the comment. I'd love for you to leave me a comment. I will read all of them. And if there's a video that you'd like me to review, post that there as well. As always, I'm Jack. Let's come on big for a moment. I'm Jack. Thanks for being here.